presidential music. Brought to you because we are talking about last night's vice presidential debate between Mike Pence and Kamala Harris. And joining us this morning bright and early is political science professor Jim Moore from Pacific University. Good morning, friend of the show. Thank you for joining us. Initial thoughts. How did you feel about last night? Calm, professional, ideas were gotten across?
A lot calmer, a lot more ideas. It highlighted basically for both, but especially for Mike Pence, that they have different views of reality. But that's what debates are about, basically making a difference between you and the other side. And we saw a lot of that last night. And then there's things that, we can talk about. The dynamic between Mike Pence and Kamala Harris as people. We saw a lot of that as well. So I think it was an informative debate, but if you were looking for something that would keep you on the edge of your seat, it was not that debate.
I'm just glad that they got to complete full sentences because we did not see that last week. So this was your more traditional staid debate, although there were some tense moments. Before we dive into the meat of that, can we talk about style, and can you compare Kamala Harris versus Mike Pence?
Sure. So Kamala Harris, people have been talking about her style, and last night she was wearing the black, which was amazing. She then was really self-possessed. You could tell she had been a prosecutor. Mm-hmm. You could tell she had been a senator who had basically gone through questions with people when they come before her committees. You could tell she was in command of what she was doing. But the fascinating thing to me was, of all the candidates who've been women at this stage, so Hillary Clinton, Geraldine Ferraro, when we look at them, I think gender it almost was neutralized with her because she was so good and so intense. So the idea that she was a woman became kind of a real secondary kind of thing. It was really fascinating.
Good, finally.
Mike Pence, on the other hand, yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. Keep going, Jim.
Mike Pence, on the other hand, Mike Pence, on the other hand, he's quiet. He's very quiet, and he's very contained as well. He looks like he should be a groom on top of a wedding cake. And when that fly landed on his head, the internet exploded.
Oh my gosh.
So his style, much more defending the president, but also being within himself all the time. So we didn't see the explosions that we saw from the president last week.
Speaking of that fly, it has multiple Twitter accounts.
Yeah.
It did almost instantly. So many people, including myself, you're sitting there, you're watching, and I'm like, his hair is so white. And I was like, what is that on?
Yeah, you thought it was like on your TV screen or something
and then
at
I was
first.
like, no, and it just stayed there forever. Actually, I was reading this morning that the Biden campaign is selling fly swatters called Truth Over Flies. Oh, so they did not waste any time trying to monetize that and kind of get it out there in pop culture. Let's also talk about what Senator Harris had to do and what the vice president had to do last night. They each had their marching orders, and I want to know what you thought the highlight was, and did they accomplish that?
Sure. So marching order for Mike Pence, the sitting vice president, is he's got to show that he has got President Trump's back. He's got to show that he is there for the Trump ideas and pushing those ideas. And so that's the primary thing. And so there were several times when he stretched the truth or told things that weren't true in very interesting ways, but you knew that his main audience that was sitting in the White House, the president, was clapping and saying, "You go, Mike, that's exactly what's going on." So that's what he had to do. But he also had to do what the president had to do last week and did not do a good job of. Mike Pence has to move voters. Remember, the Trump-Pence team is behind. They've got to move voters over to their side. And on that part, I don't think he was very successful at all. Kamala Harris, on the other hand, once again, she had to show that she's now on the Biden team. Remember, she had some interesting debates with him. In fact, Biden was shocked at one point when she took off after him on issues dealing with Black lives and things like that. And so she had to show she was on the Biden team, and she had to navigate the complexities of what the Green New Deal is about. Does Joe Biden favor it or not? All that kind of stuff. She did fine on that. She didn't have to move voters because they're ahead. So she was able to play more of a defensive game and come out when she needed to. Mike Pence had to be much more aggressive and move voters, and I don't think he did very well at all.
Yeah, let's talk about the strategy on COVID. That was the opening issue from the moderator, Susan Page, last night. And I thought there was interesting tactics taken by Mike Pence in how to, kind of turn the discussion on that. It was asked about, okay, the president, 18 of his White House, friends and staff and senators now have the virus as well because of that, nomination ceremony, no one wearing masks, no one social distancing. What kind of example is that to the American people by your own administration's guidelines? And, you really, I'm sure Kamala Harris was like, yeah, what are you going to say to that? As well as a lot of people. And Pence really was able to kind of morph it into a way of saying, we trust the American people to make their own decisions. We trust the, American businesses to be open and help the economy, but to do it safely in a way that, works for them. And they kind of turned it of like, okay, this is our administration. This is how we are doing things here. And we're testing, every single day. And I thought that was kind of an interesting strategy of turning it to, okay, American people, we trust you to keep yourself safe.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And think about it. Conservatives think that we should have free choice, that people should be free to make the choices they want to make. And that's exactly what Pence's assumptions were in that. And it works great for the people who think that the virus is not that big a deal, and for people who think that the main thing is that the economy needs to recover regardless of the virus. Does it move voters? I don't think so. The other part of COVID, of Pence's answer, was to go back and basically say it's China's fault. So getting it over to China there pretty quickly. I was kind of surprised in Kamala Harris's response when Pence talked about the president quickly shutting down all travel with China, and that really saved. He put a number out there. And it was like he put a number of hundreds of thousands of lives that it had saved and things like that. When the president did that, he did that after he'd been lobbied to do that for about 3 weeks, and he'd refused to. And then it was limited, so a whole bunch of Americans came back from China and brought COVID with them. Mm-hmm. So I expected Kamala Harris to say, well, just a little bit of a fact check on that. That really didn't do much. Mm-hmm. But she didn't go that way. So it was up to Pence basically saying, I want a free market solution. I want people to make their individual choices. That's going to resonate with a lot of people, but a lot of people are going to look and say, look, I know people who died. I haven't been able to go to work because I'm afraid of getting sick. So it's going to rub a lot of people the wrong way.
Something else Senator Harris didn't do was hammer the point home that President Trump contracted coronavirus. Good idea strategically?
Yeah, I think so. You don't want to really be, it's hard to divorce the fact that Trump got the virus from his policies on the virus. And it's an area you don't want to be seen as piling on somebody who's really sick.
Right.
Even though the president denies that he's really sick. And so I think it was wise, but it then led to both of them being asked specific answers, and they didn't answer the answers at all. They'd say, well, good point, and I'd like to give you 2 words, and I want to go off and talk about something else. So it led to what my frustration always is with these kinds of debates. They don't really actually get to the questions, and it's hard to get them back to get to substantive things.
Mm-hmm. I thought it was an awkward, it's a great question, but it was just like after it was asked, I was like, oh my gosh, how are you going to answer this? To the question of the age and health and cognitive abilities and whatever of each of these candidates. President Trump at 74 and, Joe Biden at 78 now. He would be the oldest president in American history. And, what would that mean now that we're really looking at our VP candidates here? How did you kind of take that question? I wonder if that's ever been asked in a debate such as this.
Yeah, no, it's been asked a little bit because when Ronald Reagan was running, who then became at that point the oldest elected president that we'd ever had, age was something that had been talked about. Mm-hmm. In fact, there was a specific question in a debate about that. And then he turned and he said, I'm not going to bring up my opponent's age if my opponent, doesn't mind about that.
Yeah, that was a good line.
He turned it around in a very clever way. But in this case, it was fascinating the way both of them just ran away from that. talked about, well, I've learned this, I've learned that, this is what it's like. It's fascinating to me because then there was a follow-up about basically, so have you talked with the candidate or President Trump about what happens if you need to step in to become the president? That's what the vice president's job is. Okay, and with that, Kamala Harris gave a better answer. Mike Pence, it looks like he's never talked to Donald Trump about that, and that's not surprising, given Donald Trump's personality.
Yeah, no kidding.
But it's a fascinating thing. That's the one job of the vice president.
Yeah. But she rattled
one
off
job
her,
of the vice president, and they really didn't want to get into it.
Right. Her qualifications, I mean, she's an attorney, she's been a senator, she's on, however many Senate committees. I mean, she knows her stuff, and you could tell. And so I thought that was a nice kind of listing of a resume of it's okay, guys, I do have experience kind of with this.
Right.
We asked people on our show this morning, what did you see last night? Did it sway any of your votes? And we want to share a couple comments of those. And this person, these are text comments. You can see the phone number in the bottom right, 503-226-5088. Let us know and tell us your name because we can't tell. Did not change my mind. Still voting for Biden. Pence just deflected most questions. This person says, yes, it made me like Trump and Pence. And this person says Harris scored a 9 out of 10 for them. Pence just told the same lies Trump always spouts. This person says, yes, definitely voting for Trump. Pence was awesome, and Harris is scary as a leader. This person says, didn't change my mind. It reaffirmed the desperate need to get Trump out of the White House. We need Kamala and Joe. So let us know, did it, affect your vote? Are you changing your mind? 503-226-5088.
And people are weighing in on our Facebook stream.
Yeah.
Good morning to everybody. Jeff Lucas, one of our regulars, says, I don't think anyone won the debate. At least it was civilized. I think a lot of people who watched the first debate with the presidential candidates feel the same way. Willie Huey, good morning to you. He says, makes me wonder, you think Pence has ever let a woman finish before him? What about that, Professor? Kamala Harris looked directly at the vice president several times and says, I'm still speaking. And she had a little bit of that edge.
There was I even did
attitude where it's kind of like, no, you're not going to cut me off.
Yeah.
There were times as well that Vice President Pence was very deferential, saying, kind of complimenting her on where she has gotten to professionally in life. Kind of break that down for us.
Sure. Yeah, I think one of the memes that'll come out of last night is, I'm still talking here.
Yeah.
Okay. She was good at that, and she's had a lot of experience with it. And just as you would expect, as a woman, a black woman, someone who's come up and been the first woman in so many places that men dominate, she's good at that. She's really good at that. Pence also, he specifically talked about the phone call that he made to her when she got the nomination. As he said, this was a historic thing. You being here is a historic event in and of itself. And he also said something that was really endearing. He said, as someone who never expected to be sitting here myself until I got that phone call, I know exactly how you're feeling. So there was a moment there of, geez, we're in this together. We're on this big stage. So it was really interesting.
Yes, it made me feel better about it. Brenda and I were talking. I loved watching it because you could hear what they're saying, and there was, ideas getting across. But it was also fun, that each of them was quiet and didn't interrupt, too terribly bad at all. But it was fun to see the facial expressions, they have them on the split screen, and she was making some really good ones, in between. Yeah. And so me and my husband were just like, oh, look at that. Oh my gosh, he got her, or she got him, or whatever. And it was just a nice experience of getting back to, decorum, I guess.
Yeah, but there were also, it was so much quieter. It's hard to really get into this in detail. It was clear, though, that Pence is used to being the vice president in the room, and if the president's not there, he keeps talking until he's done. And the moderator had a hard time shutting him down, and he would talk over Kamala Harris as well. And so that's where she was beginning to push back, which is she's going to be, if she wins, the vice president in the room. She needs to be the one who's in charge of those conversations. So that kind of dynamic was fascinating to watch. And watching the moderator, who I think did a pretty good job. She certainly asked better questions than Chris Wallace did last week. I think the moderator did a pretty good job of basically saying you got 15 seconds, trying to keep them on the path so they could end on time and get to some of the issues.
We've watched so many debates over the years. The whole interrupting thing is front and center because of what happened with President Trump and Joe Biden. But I have never before this seen any candidate get up there and stop talking when the moderator said stop talking.
That's not new.
Right? They do that all the time.
Yeah.
Jim, one of the things that I really want to talk about, because I want to know who you think landed the best points on this, is when they were talking about abortion and the Supreme Court, because I felt like in some ways Pence really came to life during that exchange.
Yeah, but it was interesting because he was asked directly about abortion, and he basically, that's his key issue.
Yeah.
That's what got him elected governor of Indiana. That's what's been the heart of his candidacies in all his offices. And the first time he was asked, he basically didn't answer it. It was fascinating. And then they came back and he said, I'm firmly a pro-life person. And so it was a weird missed opportunity, and then he jumped back in. So I don't know what was going on.
Is there a strategy behind that of not to be too over to one side because you already have those people?
Don't you think that the American people, though, if you look at the polls, they do favor keeping abortion in some way, shape, or form? I mean, it must be a bit of a delicate dance for the Republicans.
Yeah, it is definitely a delicate dance for the Republicans. It's also been the case because abortion has not really been central to the Trump administration. We talk about it in terms of will the Supreme Court deal with it, but it's not. The Trump administration hasn't proposed new rules or anything, any major stuff. So it may have been that Pence was kind of going through his mind saying, what does the president think about this?
Yeah.
How can I really get this so that it's what the president would say? So that could have been part of it. I don't know for sure, but it was a strange moment. And then he jumped in and it was exactly the Mike Pence you would expect.
But you know what I was talking about when he came to life is when he looked at Kamala Harris and said, are you going to stack the court?
Yeah. That was really interesting.
She didn't answer, really.
And he gave her a history lesson. And then she gave him a history lesson on Abraham Lincoln that wasn't quite right, but it got the point across really well. I thought that was really good. I think she should have looked at him and done this. She should have said, the Republicans and Mitch McConnell have stacked the court. They have already packed the court. We need to unpack it and put Democrats where Democrats need to be. Remember, Mitch McConnell, anticipating that there could be a Republican victory in 2016, held up 128 federal judgeships, all of which were then approved by Donald Trump nominating people and Mitch McConnell's Republican Senate approving them. They stacked the court. They're the ones who have packed it together. But she didn't do that. She didn't do that. She did the Abraham Lincoln thing, which I thought was clever, but it wasn't as direct as to what's happening today.
A couple comments from our viewers here watching, and a couple from our regulars. Jeff Lucas says, the strategy is to spend the time saying what you want, but then get to the question the last 10 seconds of your time. So true, right? And what's up, Jennifer Taft? She says, my house arguing over the debate made up for the lack of drama. She's got a bi-political household. That's a fun way to be in election season. Okay, Jim, we had a lot of breaking news this morning.
Yeah, we did.
At like 4 a.m. when the debate commission for the presidential debate, which is supposed to be a town hall format next Thursday, came out and said, okay, the president has COVID. We can't have them right next to each other. Let's do it virtually. So for a couple minutes, it was on virtually. And then the president went on Fox Business News this morning with Maria Bartiromo and said, I'm not doing that. I'm not going to be ridiculously sitting in front of some computer letting them protect Joe Biden in some certain way. And now he says he's going to have a rally on that day instead. What do you make of this? Do you think we're going to see these guys come together again somehow?
It's hard to see how they can have the second debate. given especially and it's usual when a president gets sick, is the truth coming out about what the president's real condition is. That's normal that we don't really know what's going on. But quite frankly, unless the commission gets an independent person to go in there and test the president and say that he is COVID free, there's no way the debate can happen. It just can't because of health reasons. So it plays into the president what he might want to have happen. Remember, this next debate is supposed to be the town hall format, as you mentioned. That means he can't stand up and yell that much because he'll be yelling at voters who just asked him questions. And so
why wouldn't he do it virtually? Why doesn't that? I mean, it's definitely not his style. He likes to, talk in person. But why would he be so opposed to it virtually?
He's opposed to anything that takes away what he sees as his advantage. And his advantage is having a single moderator, just the two candidates, and him being able to interrupt and steamroll when he wants. We saw that's exactly his plan from a week ago, and it's what he wants to do in the future. So if you were going to take one of these out, this would be the one to take out. He definitely wants to do the last one, which will have the same format as we saw last week.
Okay, Jim, we have to switch gears this morning because we have another debate, the Portland mayoral debate, coming up here on KGW at 7 o'clock tonight. Incumbent Ted Wheeler down in the polls. Last thing I saw, 11% behind his challenger, Sarah Iannarone. So there you see 41 to 30%. Wheeler, disadvantage. What are you looking for tonight as we talk about the city moving forward through protests and police reform and COVID and the myriad issues that we're facing?
So just in terms of kind of the meta look at this, Ted Wheeler is clearly the one who needs to move voters, but so does Sarah Iannarone. This poll also showed that about a third of voters are undecided. So there's plenty of voters who are up for grabs here. Sarah Iannarone is still not that well known, but she is the alternative to Wheeler, who is very well known. So she needs to show that she has a mastery of what's going on and solutions. There have been several times, for instance, when she talked to the Oregonian editorial board, that she basically has not said what her solutions are for anything. And so she's got to be pressed on that, and she's got to say, here's some things that I will be doing, and then press a little bit further because the mayor doesn't have the power to do things. The mayor can only do things if the mayor has 3 votes on the city council. Ted Wheeler, on the other hand, has to show that he is in the middle of things and that staying with him would be the better way to get to solutions. So he needs to say, we're 60% of the way there to dealing with whatever it is, protests, homelessness, economic development on the east side, whatever it is. And you, by staying with me, we get to 100%. We'll do that within the next couple of years. So he's got to make that kind of argument. Remember, he's the one who mainly has to move voters. Sarah Iannarone can step back just a little bit, but because there are so many undecideds, they both have to be kind of aggressive and try to get people to say, oh, I like that candidate over that candidate.
And this isn't a situation of where you have a liberal and a conservative, where they're different. You have Ted Wheeler, who's liberal, and then you have Sarah Iannarone, who is, even more extreme, it seems, than that. And she's already said, she's going to put Joanne Hardesty in charge of the police as police commissioner. And Joanne Hardesty completely, gets rid of the fact that she says yesterday there's only been one night of rioting in Portland and the police are doing the rest of the violence. So you have to kind of weigh, right? Voters have to weigh of like, okay, am I okay with what's been happening up until now, or do you want to kick it up a notch?
Yeah, absolutely. It's because of the protests and then the riots that all happened after 11/15 or whatever. There's an ongoing issue that has to be dealt with, and that makes any election very much more interesting. Usually elections are more theoretical. You run on an issue, you get issues, you ask about issues, and they often don't happen while you're mayor. This is happening right now, so this is very different. A little bit of a comparison to New York City. They were having an election the day that 9/11 happened. They postponed it, but then the election completely changed when they actually held the election later in the year, and it was public safety. What are you going to do to keep us safe? That was the dominant thing because it was happening right then.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. That debate airing tonight on KGW at 7 o'clock. Jim Moore, thank you so much, as always, political science professor from Pacific University. We will see you on the next one. Bye.
Bye.